The Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk is about to fall. I mean, it's essentially surrounded. Not by Russian soldiers, but with drones, making resupply and evacuation nearly impossible. Now, I want to start today with a clip that just came out from the Ukrainian 25th Airborne Brigade showing the unique challenges of trying to get in and out of Pokrovsk right now. Most of it's done on foot, 10, 15, 20 kilometers or more, under the constant threat of Russian drones. Let's go ahead and play this clip here. And had some soldiers from the 25th reach out and share this and say that they're in the process of fundraiser. I'm going to link that in the description below to try to get these guys, this unit, more vehicles. As you can imagine, they're getting destroyed left and right, trying to get their soldiers in and out of position. So if interested in able, that fundraiser will be linked in the description below. These carts, I had a Ukrainian soldier recently mention that they're in high demand. So many of these operations to get supplies in and, more importantly, get the wounded out are being done on carts. I mean, how else are you going to haul somebody 10, 15, 20 kilometers if they can't walk? Now, I'm going to blur some of this out because there is some couple of graphic scenes showing a bit of gore. I will have the source video linked in the description below if you want to watch it in its entirety, the original channels this came out of. But it bounces around a little bit. We see the guys moving into Pokrovsk, initially with some supplies. Saw that in the first cart. And then they've got a couple wounded they're pulling out. It looks like they ran over a landmine there, a little toe popper mine. And then we see them kind of cutting through rubble. They say this was after a guided bomb strike, and it buried a couple soldiers, and they had to move in there and kind of cut them out from beneath this rubble. And then again, evacuate on foot. The reason for this is there's a blown out vehicle. These vehicles are so easily identified, so easy to see so far out on the road that the safe place, if you will, for vehicles has been pushed further and further and further back, especially around Pokrovsk. And this started months ago, for what it's worth. But it's gotten to the point where the last, it was 5, then 10, then 15, now 20 plus kilometers has to be done like this, getting people to and from position. But you'll see at the very end here, they do actually load up into a vehicle for the last little stretch back to the rear areas. But I wanted to play that video because I think it gives a good idea of what we're going to see when we look into the situation at Pokrovsk and how it's playing out right now. So starting out, I'm going to go over to Deep State Map to give you an idea of the areas we're going to be looking at today. Pokrovsk, again, not surrounded in the traditional sense. There are still Russian forces to the northeast and to the west. They are no doubt trying to close this pincer. They have not. They might not. What with Ukrainian forces still inside, we generally have not seen that tactic actually play out. But this entire area to the northwest of the city is pretty well entirely covered by Russian drones. So turning back to a couple statements here made recently, Ukrainian President Zelensky said, quote, Russia outnumbers Ukrainian troops 8-1 in their offensive to capture the semi-surrounded city of Pokrovsk in eastern Donetsk. They quoted Senior Lieutenant Stoyko, the head of the medical services of the 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade, currently deployed to the Pokrovsk sector, saying, quote, all of the bridges into Pokrovsk were blown up by the Russians, and the evacuation of the wounded is nearly an impossible task. And I wanted to provide some Ukrainian perspectives here to start, and we do have the Russian point of view as well, but Financial Times quoted Konstantin Mashevets, a military analyst with the Kyiv-based Information Resistance Group, saying, quote, enemy groups of 3 to 5 men, and less frequently 8 to 10, are observed moving throughout virtually the entire southern part of the city. The enemy is actively creating chaos within the defense inside the city, using sabotage methods rather than a systematic assault in the classical sense, building by building. I'm going to turn over to, go back to the map here. I'm going to pull up Suryak map because I think this shows a little more detail on where the lines are inside of Pokrovsk right now. So the most recent report is that there are pretty well-established Russian positions south of the rail line here. And turning to a Russian mill blogger assessment here, Alexander Karchenko, a little more optimistic in Russia's chances here to take the city in the near term. He says, quote, our fighters are in Pokrovsk, but you do not see armored columns breaking into the urban areas. Some small groups infiltrate the city and conduct its clearing very carefully. A note on that, I don't know that I would refer to the Russian tactic in Pokrovsk as being very careful clearance. We did an interview a couple months ago with Uno, one of the assault platoon commanders in Azov talking about this tactic. It was Uno and Vegas. They were talking about this tactic, and they said something that stuck with me, where this infiltration tactic of moving 1 to 5 soldiers at a time through the gaps in Ukrainian lines and kind of hunkering down, waiting for, small reinforcements to be given the order to move forward. They said it's an incredibly effective tactic if you don't care about losing soldiers. And that kind of hit. I mean, if you think about how we've watched Russia execute a lot of this war, that's kind of a deadly combination for the Russian military, deadly for Ukraine, right? Because we've seen time and time again that Russia generally cares a lot less about their soldiers than we do in the West. And if they don't care all that much about losing them, but they see some progress in the battlefield, you better bet they're going to continue utilizing that tactic. And that is what has been successful recently in Pokrovsk. They say, yes, there are points on the map where the Ukrainian military still remains, but if you talk to prisoners, everything falls into place. The defense of Pokrovsk has long since broken into small enclaves. Soldiers have been sitting for 2 months without supplies or evacuation. This is something we've talked about quite a bit. There is not a continuous line, and this is not just Pokrovsk, but generally across the entire front. There is not a unified line of Ukrainian trenches, but small positions that are held by team-size elements on or about, say, 2 to 5 soldiers, and then drones are generally used to fill the gaps. And they've been pretty effective. We're going to play a video here in a second, run through another Russian armored assault where their vehicles, their tanks, just got smashed. Again, not because there was a Ukrainian defensive line of trenches and anti-tank barriers, but because of the drones overhead that were covering that sector. Now, Karchenko, the Russian mill blogger, continued saying, if there is no longer logistics to Pokrovsk, then that is an encirclement. Yes, you will not see a company of soldiers repelling an enemy tank breakthrough, but often even 2 people on a landing are enough. In any case, the battle for Pokrovsk is coming to an end, and we soon will see the Russian flags over the city. And that's where, look, he's right. Like, when you completely cut off the logistic flow, and right now a lot of it is being done either on foot, like we saw in that video from the 25th, or aerial resupplies done with larger drones, Baba Yaga, vampire-type drones. There's only so much you can bring in and out with those at this point. So when logistics are completely cut off, it's really just a matter of time before those positions are no longer tenable. And we have now for a while entered the phase where the conversation is being had of what is the tactical value of continuing, tactical and operational value of continuing to hold this territory. Is it worth it? Or is it now time to fall back to the next line of defense? I would expect that argument to intensify here in the coming days and weeks. Now, an interesting aspect when looking at this Pokrovsk battle is, again, what we have seen Russia be successful at in this area particularly is the use of those infiltration tactics. I don't want to write that off like that is the only reason that they have made any progress in Pokrovsk. This battle has been going on for a long, long time, and for months now, the Russian Air Force has been hammering Pokrovsk with very large guided bombs. So they're hammering the city. We've seen a lot of shelling from MLRS and other systems, and maybe most significantly, the deployment of the Russian Rubicon Group, which is Russia's most technologically and tactically advanced drone unit. They came here, I want to say early summer, if not even before that, maybe even spring. They redeployed from the Kursk area down here, and they just have a lot of resources, and they immediately went to work making Pokrovsk untenable. All of that led to these infiltration tactics that we're seeing today and the effectiveness of those on the battlefield. Now, a key note that I wanted to call out is we are seeing those infiltration tactics utilized in Pokrovsk, but up here to the north, near Dobropilia, it's the total opposite. We are continuing to see large-scale Russian armored assaults, and another video just a couple days ago of like nearly 30 Russian vehicles getting knocked out by Ukrainian drones. So we've got a couple different clips here I want to play from Azov, 1st Azov Corps, and then the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, saying on October 27th, the Russians made another attempt at a mechanized attack in the Dobropilia area, trying to capture the settlements of Shakov and Volodymyrivka. Let me, I went away from the map too quick here. So this is the area here. Zoom out. We've got Pokrovsk down here to the south, a little further north. This area here. And the way the Russians are presenting this is they have to take this if they want to close off this pocket. I feel like this has been the constant Russian thing, right? There's this one location they have to have. It's the linchpin, and then they throw everything they have at it until it's actually taken. I mean, we're kind of seeing that in Pokrovsk as well. But either way, that's the Russian argument right now is Shakov right here and Volodymyrivka have to fall for them to close out this pocket. Now, turning back to the video here from Azov in the 93rd, they say the enemy threw 29 units of armored vehicles into the attack, making this offensive one of the largest in recent times. The distinctive feature of the attack was the increase in the number of tanks. The enemy tried to complicate the actions of the defense forces of Ukraine by advancing equipment in small groups, 4 to 5 units along different routes and at different times. The occupiers also counted on unfavorable weather conditions, which complicate the operation of drones. Despite this, their plan was thwarted. The enemy attack, which lasted more than 6 hours, was repelled. They say as a result, the enemy lost 15 units of equipment, 2 tanks, 12 armored combat vehicles, and 1 light vehicle. Enemy infantry that disembarked from the vehicles was destroyed by FPV drones. The clearing of enemy infantry at landing sites continue. So again, the continued use of these large-scale armored assaults that kind of fell out of favor for a long time, but turns out Shakov is actually important enough to sacrifice essentially all of these armored vehicles. Now, sticking up in this sector here, and I want to make sure we stay on Suryak map for this case, Rodinsky, right here. According to Suryak map, this is now held by Russian forces. If we go over to Deep State map, it is not. An important difference here because we just got this footage, came out a couple days ago, showing what are Russian forces carrying out one of these flag planting operations in Rodinsky, and Azov actually came out with their own video saying, "Nope, we'll prove that the Russians they may have been there, they are no longer there. We eliminated that element." So this is a video again put out by Azov. It's calling it refutation of the occupiers' fake Rodinsky is under the control of the defense forces of Ukraine. Once again, the Russians have claimed to have taken a settlement controlled by Ukrainian defenders. Currently, only the ammunition of a few infantrymen who entered the outskirts of the city is under their control. And the footage they shared here was a BTR crew from the Jaguar Battalion of the 14th Brigade, 1st Corps of the Azov National Guard, or National Guard Azov, say they destroyed Russian infantry entrenched in abandoned buildings in Rodinsky. The fighting continues to clear the city of occupiers. A search and elimination of all of those wishing to install the tricolor on Ukrainian soil is underway. So I wanted to show that just as kind of a reminder that a lot of times we do see these flag planting operations, and different sources at different times are kind of quick to say, got it, that is now Russian control, and at the very least still contested. So that whole deal, especially with these small groups of infiltrators, is very much still something happening all across the battlefield. Now, we're kind of knocking these large-scale armored assaults, I think understandably so, because they're taking pretty significant losses. But we did see some Russian success in this just last week. So I got to zoom out a little bit here and come over to the Orhiv axis, where Orhiv right here in the center, to the southeast, actually all across this front, Russia carried out multiple armored assaults. Where they saw some success was right here in Mala Tomchaka. And we got a couple different accounts here. In fact, some videos that Russia put out showing this assault in recent days. So Russian mill blogger 2 Majors says, quote, Russian units having secured themselves in Malaya Takmaka, no way I'm getting that right, continue fighting in the center of the settlement, trying to push the enemy north beyond the river and further west, while the Ukrainian armed forces have already begun withdrawing some forces, mining basements, and buildings. They say, meanwhile, on the western flank, the gray zone is growing. There, Russian airborne units have managed to penetrate the built-up area, but full control is not yet established. The situation is very difficult. They say the Ukrainian units here do not experience supply problems, either with drones or artillery ammunition, so the fighting is very short-lived and extremely intense. They say the enemy clears several houses at a time, even when detecting 1 or 2 Russian armed forces soldiers, which obviously complicates the advance. Nevertheless, the withdrawal from Malaya Takmacha to Orhiv, I think I said that differently every time I said that town, may signal a possible weakening of this line. The worsening situation of Ukrainian formations in other directions forces the Ukrainian command to concentrate reserves to strengthen problematic sectors. So we'll see. The Russian assessment there is that this Orhiv direction is actually a weakness in the Ukrainian lines. I think that's yet to really be seen, but they do note no supply, no logistical issues, so the Ukrainian military is able to mass firepower at the right place at the right time. Now, quick note, just wrapped up, just back from Washington, D.C. today from the Ukraine Action Summit. Got to take part in a panel discussion there on how to communicate with partners, donors, and an American audience. And it was awesome, start to finish. It was a 5-day event total. I was there for about 2.5. Got to meet a lot of wonderful people. If you were there and you came up and said hi, thank you so much. It was great to meet so many of you in person. I'm excited. There were a lot of really good conversations, a lot of great introductions with folks from big organizations to individual journalists that are covering the conflict, many of whom are in Ukraine and came over for this event. And I think it's going to provide a lot of access to just provide more detailed information on things that are like adjacent to what we discuss in these videos, but I don't necessarily dive into. One great example was a Ukrainian journalist that covers domestic politics in Ukraine. I said, great. I don't fully understand much of that at all. Another was a war crimes investigative journalist for the Kyiv Independent. Like, again, being able to talk to people. And I think we're going to try to line up some interviews with some of these folks to dig into some of those subjects that I don't have a solid base of knowledge in. So it'd be great to tap into their expertise and try to share some of their work. But either way, keep an eye out for that. We'll have it hopefully here before too long. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.